What is going on, guys? Jack here, and welcome to episode 147 of the Rise to Glory here with Gibraltar Apex. And today I have for you guys our end of season review for our 20th season. And as you can see here, we're starting by taking a look at our manager profile. We've been at the club 20 years now. It's been 2 decades of mostly success. Of course, if you missed last episode, go check it out. As I said, Champions League final, worth a watch. And well, it's been a mixed bag, really, hasn't it? Especially last year, this season that's just gone, it's been a season of almost, but in some ways that's motivated me more and more. I must be honest, I've not touched the save in a little over a week. I kind of just took a little bit of a break after the Champions League final, wanted to collect my thoughts before kind of going into the new kind of pre-season and off-season where I'm hopefully going to obviously continue our ascent up the kind of European ladder and continue to add strength to our squad. So anyway, this isn't going to be your normal end-of-season live-com. The reason for that being, of course, is that the Champions League game was the last game of the year. And as a result, well, simply put, there isn't a game to cover. This is going to be all about the numbers, all about the stats. You may notice some changes to the Gibraltar Primera division. They are kind of almost a preview for what will be coming your way at the next episode. If you don't know, I'm doing a big revamp of Gibraltar. I've talked about it on Twitter. You'll see hints of that in this episode. Try and ignore them if you can before the big unveil. But I was testing them out and they look really good in game, so I'm really happy about that. I should also point out, with this being episode kind of 20 or the end of season 20, I want to at the start of next episode almost provide a bookmark episode. So this might slightly overlap this episode in some ways, but I almost want episode 148 to be an episode which might even be renamed episode 1, where it's the kind of a new start in some ways. It will have been 20 years at the club to get us to where we are now, but when you compare what the save was to what it is now, it's changed a lot. It really has changed a lot. And as a result, I want to provide a point where people who don't want to watch all 140 odd episodes can come in at that point. They can watch an episode, feel like they're up to date, know the club situation, and can enjoy the series that you guys who have been watching it all the way through. And obviously, massive thank you to you guys who have been watching it all the way through. So anyway, I guess to start with, we'll take a look at our fixtures and most specifically our Champions League run that you guys can see here, because it was a really good run. Of course, we did lose once in the group stage to Everton, but we'd already finished kind of in the top 2 in our group at that point. And we had some really good results. The 5-0 win against Porto, a fantastic result there, a really memorable one. Of course, Du's getting a hat-trick in this game, a player who I wasn't sure I wanted to sign him a few years ago. He has proven to be an exceptional signing at £16 million this year. 28 goals and 16 assists in 21 league appearances. 49 goals in all competitions. The man is a monster. And he's done a really good job for us, in a hat-trick in this kind of game really epitomised the kind of season he had. We, of course, drew against Everton and lost to them, but wins against Copenhagen and Porto really secured us a really solid footing in Group G, and well, it saw us move on into the knockout stages, which, of course, was really always the aim for this year, was to try and get to the semi-final, maybe the final if we were really, lucky. Of course, after last season's disappointment of getting knocked out in the second knockout round, or the second round of the Champions League, the first knockout round, it really was a kick in the teeth, and I wanted to bounce back from that. Of course, we bounced back well in our first game. We lost against Real Madrid 1-0 at the Bernabeu, and we had to come back, and come back we did. They missed a penalty, which somewhat played into our hands, although they did score a few minutes after that. But in the second leg, a memorable performance, a 3-1 win, Moscow with 2, Rildo with 1. Their late goal was really only a kind of consolation. Moscow with the Man of the Match award. What a season he has had for us. He has been the difference maker, the 24-year-old Brazilian. 55 goals for the year. I didn't think he'd ever better his season from a few years ago, but he did. 87 goals in all competitions. His previous best, I believe, was 70, so it's a little bit of an improvement right there. An absolutely ludicrous sum of goals. I don't feel like I've had a player score 87 goals in FM since the days where you had kind of the Diablo tactics and the grid. And if you don't know about those tactics, essentially they just broke the match engine. It feels like at times Mosca is breaking the match engine single-handedly. I know I get a lot of questions about his nationality. When is he going to be eligible for Gibraltar? 203 days, half a year. I really hope he just declares for Gibraltar immediately and doesn't sit around hoping Brazil are going to give him a chance. I think it'd be really awesome if we could have him play. for Gibraltar, and I'm really hoping that will be the case one day. I have had some questions as well about managing Gibraltar. It's definitely something I want to do. Thomas Gallardo, the current manager, is still in charge at the moment. I kind of feel like I want to wait until the end of whatever the next qualifying campaign is for Gibraltar before I take over, so that might be at the start of next episode. It might not be, but we're going to kind of play it by ear and see how things go, but hopefully you guys will of course stick around for that. Anyway, in the quarterfinals, we beat Manchester City 3-2 on aggregate, and what a comeback this was. Of course, Joe Bouchard with a tragic mistake which gave Helber his second goal of the game to make it 2-1, and at that point you wondered, was that mistake going to be costly? And well, the ultimate kind of result was, no, it wasn't. Moscow with 2 goals in a game that we probably deserved to win at the Space Park. Fantastic attendance as well. Moscow, as I said, single-handedly carrying us a lot this year, but we had other players who did jobs for us, and 2 of those players were Sébastien Girard and Walid Douz, 2 players who got a goal each in the game against Bayern Munich in the away tie in this fixture. 2 good goals, really. Twice we pegged back Bayern Munich from behind. A really good performance. Girard, along with Douz and of course Moscow, really has stepped up to the plate this year. He's been superb, the Belgium. And I'm hoping at 21, much like Douz, he is just going to continue to improve for us this year. 13 goals and 14 assists. Of course, adapting to that new kind of centre-attacking mid-role, a role which he's still got a little bit to learn, but he's definitely shown a real sign of promise there, and I'm hoping he is going to continue to develop at 21 years old. Just looks like an absolutely exceptional talent. Of course, in the second game against Bayern Munich, we relied on a late goal, really, Moscow, to carry us through. In truth, that goal actually didn't matter too much, as we would have gone through on away goals, but to secure it with 86 minutes gone and only a few minutes left on the clock was a great way to do it. And that saw us get to the final, which of course you guys know how it went down. Moscow with the early goal, but ultimately in a very tight game, our midfield kind of went missing. There wasn't a lot of creativity, and unfortunately that was the difference between the 2 teams. And Valenzuela got a hat-trick, Sanjak got a goal, our former man, if I can find him here. Where is he? Messiah Ono went off in the 85th minute. He got 2 assists. I mean, do I regret selling this guy? Yes, I do. I didn't actually think he was going to be that great when we sold him for £4 million, if I'm honest. But I mean, I've been proven to be wrong right there. He looks like he has the face of a madman. He looks part werewolf, really. But that was a heartbreaking result, of course. Anyway, looking at the kind of positives, we got further than we ever have in the Champions League. Of course, losing the final, always heartbreaking. We, of course, did well in other competitions, however. Of course, in the Pepe Reyes Cup, we beat Gibraltar Lions 3-0, which was a great result. Girard with 2, Douz with a goal himself. In the Senior League Cup, we, of course, won it. We beat Manchester 62 in the final 3-0 with Moscow and Douz getting the goals for us against a Manchester 62 side, which was a good side, and they will continue to improve. But in this game, we really just showed our dominance still over a lot of the other Gibraltarian teams kind of in our division. In the Primera Division, of course, we went unbeaten again. That said, we did draw once with Gibraltar Lions, a result which I don't want to say it went under the radar. I feel like I did acknowledge it, but it was a warning sign, I guess, for the fact that our kind of crazy unbeaten run that spans back way over a decade at this point is under threat and probably will crumble within the next few years. And that is something that I almost look forward to in some ways. I feel like that will be a landmark almost in itself. Anyway, in the Rock Cup, of course, we did beat Gibraltar Lions 5-0. Moscow got 4 there. Moscow also got a double hat-trick in the semi-finals against Leo. And he also got 4 in the game against Manchester 62. He had a good time in the Rock Cup this year. I believe he smashed the record for most goals in a Rock Cup campaign, which is kind of fair play to him. So anyway, that's kind of how we did in all our various competitions. In terms of the squad itself, how do I feel about things? I'm pretty happy with the squad as a whole, particularly the starting 11. I feel like there's quite a lot of balance there. I'm still kind of looking for that really good defensive centre mid, a player who's going to win the ball, who's going to be a bit of a Xhaka for us in the centre of the park, and also have the ability to spread the play and kind of do a pass when we need one. Still on the hunt for that kind of player, still not found one as things stand. But with the exception of that, I'm pretty happy with the squad. I do feel like the team's got a little bit bloated perhaps over the last few years. I feel like players like Tuzon, Oliveira, I guess even Gary to an extent, they're players who I brought in and I thought they were going to be nice signings, to bring back familiar players, give them a second chance. I was kind of looking forward to it. The truth be told, they are really just bloating the squad. Of course, Mini Mosca, a player who I brought in as well this year, a player who there was a lot of fanfare behind, let's be honest. That broken leg absolutely wrecked him 2 years ago. This year, he's bounced back fairly well, to be fair to him. He's still improving, the 21-year-old. I've seen kind of appeals in the comment section to call him Moschino and Moschino and all kinds of names. No one seems to be providing me with the correct translation. So for now, at least, he's going to remain Mini Mosca until I have a Portuguese speaker who's going to confirm to me what kind of Mini Mosca would literally translate as. But anyway, looking at the rest of the team, there's a few players who I will probably look to move on. You can see there are players who just simply put didn't make an appearance this year. Skeffington made a handful. Ernesto Martinez, a player who I brought in this year and actually thought was going to be a regular backup, if I'm honest, at £2.5 million. Just, he never made an impact at this club and he's going to want to move on. I think my general strategy for this year, really, I don't want to spend too big again. I'm going to see if there's any massive players, players the likes of Gaiganov, Assad, Kabasele, maybe another Mosca, maybe a Girard, the kind of player who's going to make an instant impact. But in reality, I think a lot of what my transfer plans for this year are going to revolve around really is, trying to spend this £80 million on youngsters. Of course, we added a lot of leagues at the end of last year, so that's something I do want to do, certainly, is bring in a lot more younger players. And that's really going to be a focus, I think, going forward. We have a lack of homegrown players in Europe. I believe our squad for Europe this year consisted of 22 or 21 players because we had to leave spots open because we didn't have homegrown players to fill that slot. Of course, this year we did bring in some really good youngsters, and some of them have definitely shown kind of signs of progress. If we look here, we've got some good ones. And there is a player that I didn't talk about, which I must talk about, and I'm glad that I've remembered now because he's a player who deserves some appreciation. It's this guy, Javi Echeverria. That's probably not how you say his name. 16 years old, Spanish. Jack, what's significant about him? Well, he came through our own academy. For the first time in what must be like 15 or 16 years since Felix, we have another Spaniard who's very good come through our ranks, and that's exciting in itself. It's a shame it's taken so long. We have a very good selection of very good young goalkeepers, but he's going to be at the club. He's a promising goalkeeper. Not sure how good exactly he can become, but I'm excited just to see his development over the next few years. I have had a few comments about my star ratings. You'll notice that by default, obviously, some of the people reviewing our players, they're just not very good when it comes to judging players. Always make sure when you are comparing your players and looking at their star ratings and judging their reports, you select a coach with a good judging PA and CA. I've seen that a lot. I had someone mention the fact that a few of my players went up by a few stars, and they were like, well, how does that happen? That shouldn't be possible. The reality is, it's just a case of these stars you're seeing are lies. Anyway, in terms of other players who perform well, who kind of came in, Van Berlo had a pretty good opening year, the Dutchman. Still looks like a very good deep line playmaker for the future, the 17-year-old. We also have Buchhorst, I believe that's how you'd say his name, the centre-back here. He's improved a lot, the 17-year-old, a player who I didn't really, and I still don't really know how good he's going to become. He seems like he could become a quite good little player. He's obviously not the best centre-back in our squad by quite some margin, but at 17 years old he has a ton of potential. You'll notice there's a lot of players here in my reserve teams with their contracts expiring. I think one of the big kind of things I'm going to do this summer is release all of these. Hopefully some of them get picked up by various Gibraltarian clubs, and my plan really is to fill up the reserves with some really good youngsters that hopefully we can ship in from kind of here, there and everywhere. You can kind of see when you look at our best youngsters that I just kind of select here, pretty much all of them are non-Gibraltarian with a very few kind of select exceptions, which is not the greatest thing in the world. I'm not too fussed about it. As long as they're homegrown for me, I'll be happy. And of course, we've got a lot of players here that if we do release, will hopefully, as I mentioned, go on and play for other Gibraltarian clubs. So that could kind of benefit everyone, and everyone will be a winner long term with that. So that's kind of my plans for the youth team. There's some good players there. I don't feel like there's any exceptional youngsters there. With 80 million to spend, I'm really going to be looking for some of the best 16-year-olds I can find. I'm going to be looking for players who are already talented, who my scouts absolutely rate. Any kind of player under the age of 18, you better watch out if you're talented, because I'm going to be trying to vacuum up all that talent as best as I can. Anyway, let's move on to our actual squad here. I've already talked about the goal scorers in Mosca and Duz. What a goal-scoring tally. Mosca, 87 goals. Duz with 49. That would be exceptional pretty much under any other circumstances. I kind of feel bad for Rildo in some ways because he's our second kind of choice striker, a second-string striker. He scored 17 goals in 17 games and 22 in all competitions, and he doesn't even get a shout in the starting 11 most of the time. It's an incredibly cruel game. In terms of assists, our fullbacks have been absolutely mad this year. Of course, we've largely played the narrower system where we do rely on the fullbacks going forward, and, well, they've turned up for us. Gaiganov, 41 assists for a right back. Absolutely unreal by him. A player who, of course, we spent big money on. He is one of the big earners at the club. But over the last few years, he's really proven his worth to us. And it's worth noting that his 41 assists, they've not just kind of come in the league. He got 6 of them in the Champions League, 10 of them in the Rock Cup. Just an exceptional right back for us. And the same with Murphy Cabasele at left back. I still feel like a glaring weakness for this guy is his poor dribbling and perhaps somewhat lack of work rate. But he does the work for us, the Belgium. He's such a good player. He's, of course, as you can see, got 15 assists in the league. He got 29 in all competitions. He got 11 in cup games. It's been another ridiculous year for our fullbacks. A massive credit to them because they've built on last year where they did perform very well. And they've done the business. Another player who definitely deserves some love as well is Paul Smith. 31 years old now. I've talked about the conundrum that is Paul Smith before. As he gets older, as his physicals are going to start to decline, I just don't see where he slots into the team. I'm hoping that his physicals are obviously going to remain good for a very long time. They are certainly starting to decline. I've seen signs of that recently. I don't think he can be a winger as he gets older. I don't feel like he can be a centre attacking mid because his passing is only at 11 and his vision is his vision isn't bad. It's mostly that passing. 11 passing is a bit meh, really, for a player who a lot of the play will be coming through. And as a striker, well, he only has 12 finishing and 12 off the ball. Or, sorry, 11 off the ball even. It's a tricky one. I don't know where this guy slots in long term, but if he continues to perform as he has done this year, I will, of course, continue to play him. He's now made 292 appearances for the club, 258 goals in that time, an absolutely ludicrous record. 213 assists. I mean, you can't really argue with it, can you? An average rating of 8.59. He's been absolutely superb, Paul Smith, and hopefully he can obviously continue to be a mainstay of the side. That said, at 31 years old, he's getting on a bit. And speaking of 31-year-olds, Joe Bouchard, who of course took the captain's armband in last episode's Champions League final. Another player getting on a bit. The 31-year-old Canadian. Been at the club such a long time now, but a massive part of our plans. He's now played 383 games for the club. He's almost played 100 more games than Paul Smith, which I guess shows just how valuable he's been in the heart of our midfield for so long. Just an exceptional player, as I said, and I said it during their testimonials a few years ago. When these guys retire, I will genuinely be sad, and I'm really hoping that we're going to be able to convince them to stay on as staff. Anyway, in terms of other real kind of top performers, players not getting so much love who have been in the team a lot, we've talked about the likes of Mosca, the fullbacks, Paul Smith, Bouchard. I feel like Assad and Mustafa deserve a little bit of a nod. Assad, of course, coming in for a massive sum of money. I know some of you guys down in the comment section when I signed a centre-back for £35 million and on a really ridiculous amount of money, £115,000 a week. There were a lot of people in the comments going, Jack, what are you doing? And I kind of responded with the reality of this whole... I'm triggering the contract extension, by the way. But I kind of just replied with the fact that we have so much money to play with. It's not that money isn't an object for me. But if I see an absolutely world-class player, a player I genuinely think can make the difference, I can afford to spend as much money as I can really on that player in terms of what they're worth to me. And I feel like, for me, this guy, absolutely invaluable. Just a world-class centre-back at 23. He is the kind of player who can play alongside Mustafa, really, I hope for the next 4 or 5 years at least. Both of these guys absolutely just superb players. They complement each other so well, and both of them perform very well this year. You can see Assad definitely the better rounded player, but Mustafa, great first touch. Definitely better in the air, Mustafa. His 20 jumping reach is insane. But yeah, these two guys, they just complement each other really, really well. And, well, if we just look at their overview kind of for this year, you can see how they kind of compare. Mustafa better in the air, better technically in terms of his first touch. Perhaps slightly better vision, better Assad. Just an exceptional player in a lot of ways. Not the fastest centre-backs, either of them, but they do a job. If we look at their stats, they've made, well, 80 appearances between them. They've not got that many goals between them, nor that many assists, but they just defend well. Tackles per game is very, very good. Pass completion could definitely be a little bit better. I mean, look at their average ratings. An 8.04 and 8.05 for centre-backs is really, really good. I'm obviously going to be hoping that that can continue going into next year. Gilvan, also worth a mention, a player who's been injured a lot really over the last few years, and it's been extremely unfortunate. You can even see kind of this year he's out with a twisted ankle for 3 weeks. He's done a lot of little niggly injuries really, but he's managed to get through them now, and I'm hoping he's going to put most of them behind him. This year, it was a tough year for him. You can really see since August last year he suffered a lot of injuries. He's been out for probably a total of about 2 months, but he's continued to develop when he has been fit, and he's continued to put in good shifts. A 7.99 average rate for him, definitely worth a mention there. And all in all, really, this team, it's a really good team. If we look at the stats, I'm not going to go into all the crazy stats this year because I feel like we've done a pretty good comprehensive review of the starting 11. I feel like Ludwig Young always deserves a little bit of love. He's going to have a testimonial coming up this year. I don't know if I'm going to do his testimonial. I feel like doing a one-off testimonial as an episode would be a bit silly. Just because I feel like if there were two, it'd make more sense. But also with me having all the revamp stuff coming on, potentially a kind of clean slate episode where I kind of refresh everyone on what's happened. I feel like this in itself... kind of doing a testimonial, it wouldn't suit in. But that's not to say Ludwig Young does not deserve a testimonial. 31 years old. What a man. What a man. I feel like we've talked about a lot of the starting 11, with the exception of really Volsky, a player who came in this year. There was a little bit of a fanfare around him for £22.5 million. I feel like he's had a solid first year, a year to build upon. But I am expecting a little bit more from him given the money we paid. He's a very good centre mid. He's still young as well. He's 23 years old. I see him as kind of perhaps even a long-term successor to Joe Bouchard. That's kind of the role I see him fulfilling. If we just compare him to Joe Bouchard real quick, you can have a look. They're similar players in a lot of ways. I'm looking for Joe Bouchard. I bet it's at the top. Open your eyes, Jack. If we look at Volsky and Bouchard, Volsky is the better player, and I do see him as I said, the long-term successor to Bouchard, kind of in that deep-line playmaker role. But for now, he's kind of had to play in a slightly compromising role. But he's done an okay job there, the 23-year-old. Good opening season to hopefully build upon. Just looking for that little bit more. You know, he's shown glimpses of brilliance. Now I want to see a season of brilliance for him, basically. Anyway, in terms of other players who have played a lot for us, let's go back to the other view just quickly. In terms of other players who have played a lot of games for us who I've not talked about, obviously we've had the likes of Gaiganov, Assad Moscow. You guys know about these players by now. Mini Moscow I drew some attention to, obviously broke his leg last year, he's bounced back well. Friger's done well slotting in at centre-back when we've needed him to, the 31-year-old. Really glad that he's sticking around at the club. Had a bit of a better year compared to last year where he only played 7 games. I'm hoping he's going to kind of stay for the foreseeable future just as a player who's a very useful homegrown centre-back to have. Jose Maria's also had a fairly good year. He's not made a ton of appearances, and to be honest, when you look at our squad as a whole, we've not done a whole lot of kind of rotation this year. It's very much been the same team throughout, which I kind of like, and that's why I'm kind of leaning towards perhaps bringing in a lot more youngsters. I feel like if we bring in a lot of kind of 16 to 20-year-olds, really, mostly on the younger age of that spectrum, they're players who, when we need them to slot in, they can and be the backup for backups, but in reality our squad is fairly well balanced as it stands, and for the most part players have stayed fairly fit. Anyway, as I mentioned, Jose Maria, he's had a fairly good year. He came in for £7 million. Did we get £7 million worth of player this year? Probably not. A player who I wouldn't be against moving on if a fairly decent offer came in. He didn't really make a massive splash for us. I didn't really give him an opportunity, though, to be fair, to make a massive splash. In Europe, a 6.63 average rating in 4 games. 2 off the bench. Definitely could be better. But no, all in all, looking at our squad, it's a good squad. It's a balanced squad. As I said, youngsters definitely the prerogative going forward now, particularly this year. I feel like there's probably a lot of players that I've not discovered. I'm, of course, going to go through my typical regen finding methods. I'm going to be going through... I feel like this summer is going to be one of those summers where I just go through every single under-21 and main national team looking for the best young players. I'll look across the likes of Germany, Argentina, Brazil, Spain, Italy, just all the big nations. You know, look at the youngsters that kind of are playing for the European teams that we now have loaded as of last year. Of course, we signed a few very good young players like Varanese this year. He's done okay. He's not kind of come out of his shell massively. He's got a lot to live up to. He was billed to be the next Donnarumma. You can see there he is still billed kind of to be the next Donnarumma. Players like him are kind of what I'm going to be looking for. I don't know if we got our money's worth of him, and obviously there's a few other younger players here who we brought in as well for some fairly nice fees. I think, you know, anything less than £5 million I think is fairly fair. Bismarck, one of the big players who we paid a lot of money for, he's been a little bit underwhelming this year, the 18-year-old. Came in for £2.5 million, although there is more money set to be paid up front, depending on how his transfer goes as a whole. But he looks like an okay player, the 18-year-old. I'm really hoping he can kick on for us and continue to develop. Anyway, I feel like that's all I want to talk about this episode. It's a slightly shorter end of season review, but still 25 minutes long. Still going into a lot of detail about my thoughts with the squad. All in all, a season's of almost. I want to stress, and I've talked about it before, but when we win the Champions League, that will not just be the end of the series. There's more that I have planned. I want to get Gibraltar to a World Cup. I want to see the Primera Division climb to be the #1 league in Europe as well. At the moment, it's 21. I said I was about to end. I will do one more thing before we finish, and we will look at the... I want to look at the award winners. So in terms of Player of the Year this year, it was Mosca, third year in a row. We've had Player of the Year for the last 18 years, which isn't too bad in itself. Mosca getting it, Dues getting run up, and then Gerard getting, well, third place. Manager of the Year was us again, not entirely surprising. In terms of the Team of the Year, kind of interestingly, no midfield of ours. I don't know if that's indicative of the Champions League final. The fact our midfield went missing means that the pundits have decided just not to give any of our midfielders a nod. This was the team, though, that they went with. Obviously, flattering to have the back five our way. Would be nice to have a few players kind of in the midfield there for us. In terms of top goal scorer, it was Mosca for a fourth year in a row. Last year, he got 37. The year before that, he got 53. If I'm honest, I didn't think he'd best that again, particularly with teams improving as they have. He got 55 this year. He really did show me. And in terms of young player in the year, it actually went to a player playing for Spain. It went to Martel. This guy, 22 years old, a right back, came in for £1.2 million. Really good to see some younger players being picked up by other Gibraltarian teams. Hopefully they can obviously continue to use these players and continue to do kind of the business with them. Anyway, guys, that is going to, as I said, wrap up this episode from me. A slightly shorter end of season live com. Next episode, don't be too surprised if it feels a bit noob friendly in terms of the fact it's going to kind of almost be a reintroduction to the series. It's going to be what we'll call season 2. I want to call it season 2, episode 1. That's going to be really confusing. But you know what I mean, like in a TV show where you end a series. Obviously, most series don't last 140 something episodes, but this one has, and I hope you've enjoyed the story so far. The story is set to continue to go on. With Mosca at the helm, I think we can do anything here. So, hopefully I'll see you guys for the next one. As I said, leave a like if you've enjoyed. If you've got any comments, leave them down below. And other than that, it is me, Jack, and I will see you next time for the start of Season 21.